Hello everyone! After waiting for 3 entire natlan patches, the Pyro Traveler is finally ready to be activated in Genshin patch 5.3. Many of the elemental travelers aren't the greatest characters ever created, and with the previous one released being Hydro Traveler, which has a kit that I still question today why it exists, the expectations for the next traveler were pretty low. But fortunately, the Pyro main character is looking to have the most useful traveler kit so far, making them an actually decent unit. Since they will be available for everyone as long as you finish the natlan story, I wanted to sum up all of the updated information you need to know about Pyro MC into one final guide. I'll be explaining how the Pyro Traveler works, the best ways to build them, their potential best teams, and analyzing their place in the overall meta. Pretty much everything you need to know with simple and practical explanations while also giving more detailed analysis that is backed by TC. The Pyro Traveler is a 5-star Pyro sword character that ascends with attack, nothing special here. Similar to Mawika, Pyro Traveler can either be played as an off-field Pyro support providing buffs and Pyro application, or an on-field Pyro main DPS with Constellation 6. And while the on-field DPS playstyle isn't anything outstanding, the Pyro Traveler's supportive capabilities do look useful in the right scenarios. Pyro Traveler's normal talent is pretty standard and it will only be relevant if you're planning on playing Pyro MC as a main DPS. The main portion of Pyro Traveler's kit is in the elemental skill. The skill has an 18-second cooldown and can either be tapped or held, doing two different things. When the skill is pressed, the Traveler gains 42 Night Soul points, enters Night Soul's Blessing, and spawns a ring around them called a blazing threshold that follows the active character. When the active character gets close to enemies, the ring will do pyro damage to enemies nearby. This ring can attack every second and has standard ICD, so when attacking the same enemy, it will apply pyro every 3 seconds. Now if the skill is held down, Pyro MC does an initial hit of damage, enters Night Soul's Blessing with 42 Night Soul points, and spawns a scorching threshold that follows the active character instead. With the scorching threshold, whenever the active character does damage to an enemy, a pyro coordinated attack will be launched, dealing additional damage with a small AoE. This coordinated attack can happen every 3 seconds and has standard ICD, so it will also apply pyro every 3 seconds like the tap skill. Either the press or the hold skill can be used depending on the situation. The hold skill relies on hitting attacks but deals more damage and can occur from range. The press skill relies on being close to enemies and deals a little less damage, but the higher hit interval can be useful for teams like Bergen. Lastly, the Traveler can hold up to 80 Night Soul points, and these points will be constantly decreased while the Traveler is in Night Soul's Blessing, ending the skill duration whenever they run out of points. Their Night Soul's Blessing state, and thus the skill duration, can only last for a maximum of 12 seconds, and you can only have one of the press or hold versions existing at a single time. Pyro MC's elemental burst is very simple. It has a 70 energy cost and 18-second cooldown, and it just does AoE pyro damage and recovers a total of 28 Night Soul points over 4 seconds for the Traveler. It does decent damage, and the Night Soul points generated are nice, so you can extend the Traveler's duration within Night Soul's Blessing. Next, with the A1 passive, the Pyro Traveler's off-field pyro attacks from both press and hold skill have a little bigger AoE when they have over 20 Night Soul points. And with the A4 passive, when the active character triggers any pyro related reaction while Pyro MC's skill is active, Pyro MC will regain 5 energy, and this can occur every 12 seconds. Also, whenever Night Soul Burst is triggered, Pyro MC gets 4 energy. The Pyro Traveler does not have any special exploration passives like the other natlan characters. Next, let's go over Pyro Traveler's constellations, as just like with the other elemental travelers, you will be able to get C6 for free via the story. One special thing about the Pyro Traveler's constellations is that each of their constellations has 2 parts. One part is just the normal constellation effect that will always be active. The second part will only be active when Pyro MC is fighting against the new weekly boss. So while these secondary effects aren't that relevant since they are only available for one specific fight, I will still point them out. With C1, whenever the Traveler's elemental skill is active, the active character gets 6% damage bonus. If the character is in Night Soul's Blessing, aka a natlan character, this damage bonus is increased to 15%. Now when you're fighting the weekly boss, C1 additionally gives the Traveler attack, damage reduction, and resistance to interruption while their skill is active. With C2, after the Traveler uses their elemental skill, when any pyro related reaction is triggered by the party, the Traveler will get 14 Night Soul points, and this can happen twice per skill usage, so you can get a total of 28 Night Soul points, helping to reach Pyro MC's maximum 12-second state of Night Soul's Blessing. Against a weekly boss with C2, Pyro MC is able to provide Pyro Res Shred when they are in Night Soul's Blessing and they hit an enemy with pyro attacks. C3 increases the skill talent level by 3, and against the weekly boss, C3 also gives Pyro MC extra pyro damage bonus. C4 gives the Traveler 20% pyro damage bonus for 9 seconds after using their burst. Against the weekly boss, C4 allows the Traveler to heal the party and regain extra energy after using their burst. C5 increases the burst talent level by 3, and against the weekly boss, C5 also gives Pyro MC extra crit rate and crit damage. And lastly, C6 gives the Traveler pyro infusion on their attacks while they're in Night Night Soul's Blessing along with 40% crit damage, allowing them to play as a Pyro main DPS, and against the weekly boss they get movement speed, consume less stamina, and get an extra Pyro hit when they perform either a normal or charged attack. That's everything explained about the Pyro Traveler's kit. In order to level Pyro MC's talents past level 6, you'll need to use these cornerstone items that you get from certain story or world quests. These will act as Pyro MC's weekly boss material. Depending on the build and role you're intending to play, Pyro MC's talent leveling priority will differ. For off-field support Pyro MC, if you really want to optimize your build for damage, skill, and burst are similar in terms of motion value, but you give a slight priority for the skill. However, in most cases, it's easier and resource efficient to just build energy recharge and not care about Pyro MC's damage, so you don't have to level their talents at all. This also applies to full EM builds for certain teams. For on-field main DPS Pyro MC, you'll want to prioritize leveling the normal talent, then skill, then burst. Gameplay rotation wise, support Pyro MC is just a skill into burst and to swap to another character gameplay like most supports. And with main DPS Pyro MC, set up your support skills before swapping to Pyro MC, hold the skill, then burst if you have it, then on-field with your attacks. Next, here are the best builds for Pyro Traveler. For off-field support, common 5-star support weapons like Freedom Swarm, Key of Cash to Suit, and Peak Patrol are good for the team buffs. For 4-star weapons, EM-based weapons are decent choices if you don't need that much ER and you are specifically building an EM-centric Pyro MC. Weapons like Iron Sword, Tokubo Shigure, and Sipho's fit this category. In most cases though, ER-based options are heavily recommended to help meet Pyro MC's energy requirements. Weapons like Festering Desire, the Fontaine Fishing Weapon, and Sacrificial Sword are all good choices. The best 4-star weapon overall, however, is likely Favonia's Sword. It really alleviates Pyro MC's ER requirements as well as helping the ER Rex for the team with its extra particles. Can't go wrong with Favonius on the support. Now for main DPS Pyro Traveler, they're just a typical attack, damage percent, and crit scaler, and even EM in some teams, so any weapons that give those stats will be solid. Some 5-star weapon examples include Mist Splitter, Haranken Pakufutsu, and Jade Cutter, and some 4-star examples include the Black Sword, Finale of the Deep, and Calamity of Ashu. For artifacts, a support Pyro Traveler will very often use 4-piece scroll. Any off-field support that utilizes Night Soul loves this artifact set, and it will be the main reason that Pyro MC is good in their teams due to the damage bonus it can provide to a team. In the off chance where you already have a better scroll user on the team, 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith can be used. Also, in teams where you are using EM Pyro Traveler for Burgeon teams, 4-piece scroll isn't too useful, so you can use 4-piece Flowers of Paradise Lost or Gilded to maximize Burgeon damage. For main DPS, 4-piece Obsidian Codex will be the best choice. Pretty self-explanatory here as well, it gives a lot of stats for on-field characters using Night Soul. For artifact stats, the support playstyle can have 3 main builds. First is if you want to optimize Pyro MC as a sub DPS with ER Hourglass, Pyro Damage Goblet, Crit Circlet. However, the easier and more efficient build that I would recommend over the first build is just picking any artifact that has ER on it. Pyro MC's damage isn't that relevant and they can have a very high ER requirement and you really only want the 4-piece scroll buff. Lastly, for EM Pyro Traveler, go for EM or ER Hourglass, EM Goblet, EM Circlet. Generally, for all these builds, you want to aim for ER substats first. Then, if you're building for a crit build, aim for crit and attack subs, and if you're building for an EM build, aim for EM subs. In terms of energy requirements, I've used an ER calculator for a ton of teams, and assuming no Favonius users, there are some teams where Pyro MC just needs about 160 ER and some that need 260. So the range of energy recharge needed is quite wide depending on the team and also depending on how many Favonius users you have on the team. Thus, while it's hard to accurately recommend a singular number or range of energy recharge you should build, I think to be safe, you should be at least over 200 energy recharge and just build as much as you can. Now for main DPS Pyro Traveler, it will always be attack or EM Hourglass, Pyro Damage Goblet, and Crit Circlet for main stats. Substats prioritize crit, EM if your team takes advantage of it, then attack. Pyro MC's ER requirements are typically very high if you want to burst every rotation as a main DPS, so just focus on increasing the damage stats and burst every other rotation. Finally, let's go over Pyro Traveler's best team comps. As a support, Pyro MC can apply Pyro with either their tap or hold skill every 3 seconds during a 12-second duration. But while this may limit potential team options, there are several teams that don't mind this level of Pyro application and will greatly appreciate the 4-piece scroll and C1 buff brought by Pyro MC. For example, Kinich Burning teams can use Pyro MC well. Before the release of 5.3, Kinich didn't have a proper 4-piece scroll user for his teams, and while Mawika will be the best option for this role, Pyro MC also fulfills that role fine and will bring more damage than Toma in that slot. Chevre's Overload teams can also utilize Pyro MC for their buffs. For instance, with a Pyro main DPS like Mawika and Arlecchino, Pyro MC can be used in the team instead of Bennett, and while the MC results in less damage compared to Bennett, they still are a decent option, especially if you don't want to deal with the Bennett circle. An Electro carry like Cloran or Raiden and Chevre's Overload teams can also utilize Pyro Traveler for the same reason, 4-piece scroll buff and the slight buff from the C1. And in these teams, since Pyro MC is the main source of Pyro application, the Pyro Traveler will trigger trigger a good amount of overloads. Thus, you can build Pyro MC full EM and they will do a considerable amount of damage via overloads. In addition, Pyro MC technically has enough pyro application for Mualani single Hydro teams. However, these teams don't work in AoE, and because Pyro MC's coordinated attack has travel time, it can mess up the timing of Mualani vapes. Thus, while Pyro MC can work with Mualani, I personally wouldn't recommend it. Lastly, even when not holding 4-piece scroll, Pyro MC has some promise in version teams. Because each bloom core is a separate entity, the once every 3-second pyro application of Pyro Traveler doesn't apply. And since Pyro MC's tap skill can pulse every second when you're by enemies, they can potentially trigger Burgeons every second. So in all the Burgeon teams where Toma is the typical Burgeon trigger, Pyro MC can also be used. You do lose Toma's shield and his longer duration of pyro application though, as well Traveler's off-field pyro app lasts 12 seconds, Toma's lasts 15 seconds at C0 and 18 seconds at C2, and this may be an issue in practice. For main DPS Pyro Traveler, pretty much any team archetype that a Pyro main DPS uses, Pyro MC can play in. For example, you could try a standard vape team with either Farina or Yerlan, or a double Hydro vape team. You could even do a plunge vape team with Xianyin or some version of Mono Pyro. Lastly, a Chef's Overload team or Melt team with Silali can work as well. To conclude this Pyro Traveler guide, I wanted to share my analysis on their place in the meta in terms of overall strength as a free-to-play unit available for everyone. Considering most of the Travelers aren't that useful as you get other characters, Pyro Traveler is a welcome addition because they actually look pretty good for main character standards. Their main role in teams will be their supportive capabilities, and while their rate of pyro application isn't very high in the majority of teams that can use Pyro MC, they bring a small damage buff with their C1, and most importantly, they can proc the full benefits of 4-piece scroll. Yes, Pyro MC's usefulness is in large part because of this artifact set, but utilizing artifact buffs is a core component to character kits. Teams like Chevre's Overload and Kinich Burning are good examples that can utilize Pyro MC's strength, and even without 4-piece scroll, because Pyro MC's tap skill can attack every second, they do have the potential to be a good Burgeon trigger in pure Burgeon teams. On top of that, Pyro Traveler actually has a proper main DPS kit for the main character. Obviously, this won't be as good as your typical 5-star main DPS, but for people who really love the main character, Pyro Traveler is your best bet to make them a decent carry. If Pyro Traveler was released in 5.0, they would have actually been the best support in some team comps in terms of damage for a couple patches because they would be the only existing Pyro scroll holder that can give the max team damage buff. However, Mawika is being released alongside the Pyro Traveler, and the reality is that both as an off-field support and on-field DPS, Mawika is just a better overall character than Pyro MC. Despite this, if for instance you're not planning on pulling Mawika, or you are able to free up your Mawika for your other team, I can still see Pyro MC being useful, especially as a 4-piece scroll holder. Thus, even with Mawika's existence, if I were to rank all the Traveler kits in terms of strength, I do think that Pyro MC is the most promising and useful Traveler out of all the elements. 4-piece scroll is just that strong. And that's everything I wanted to cover about the Pyro Traveler. Big thanks to hyperwebster for the Kinich related calcs shown in this video. I hope this guide and analysis was helpful to you all in giving you a better understanding of everything related to Pyro Traveler. Just clicking and watching the video helps the channel out immensely, and if you want to show even more support, consider liking or sharing the video, or feel free to click the subscribe button for more pre-release analysis videos like this in the future. Leave any questions you have in the comments, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.